Thank you all. I was having a really interesting conversation with Dean over here at lunch. And interestingly enough, we were talking about expectations, which ironically is my first slide. I have a phrase that I use when I'm talking about associations competing in the business landscape. And I call it the Amazoning of expectations. Because the truth of the matter is, even though we do not generally compete directly with Amazon, although as they move into healthcare, that may well change, our members are their customers. Our members have an experience with Amazon that they would like to replicate elsewhere. It's easy, it's fast, it's consistent, they always get what they want, returns are super easy, they can find anything, there's recommendations, there's suggestions, there's easy access to their history. That's the kind of experience they want. In addition, Amazon knows who they are. Amazon knows who you are. Amazon knows you're here right now. No, I'm just kidding. Well, we don't know about that. But one of the things that makes Amazon Amazon is the fact that they know you rather deeply. They're able to suggest things to you that you are, wow, I actually do need more Tide Pods. Or, yes, I would like to read that book right now. I mean, they even gave us dash buttons where you hit the button and it automatically orders what you want. Amazon knows how to design an experience using data. And we are competing with that. We're also competing with Netflix and their experience. Netflix had $1 million competition to figure out how they could make their algorithm for predicting what movies you would want to see better. They ran an open contest. They said, anybody that can beat our existing algorithm by a certain amount, we will give you $1 million and buy the algorithm from you. And sure enough, somebody did beat it by, I think it was 8% more accurate in predicting what movies you would want to see depending on what movies you already watched, what movies you decided not to watch or watched part way, what other people watched that was very much like that. This is what we're competing with. And the way that they do it is data. So now I'm going to rain on everybody's parade. And I'm going to tell you that AARP is, by revenue, the largest association in this country. Their annual revenues. What's that? Their revenues are approximately $855 million. That's from GuideStar from 2016. And I'm going to ask someone to be brave and raise a hand or just shout out what you think Amazon's revenues were for the same year. 50 billion. Other guesses? Oh, come on. I know it's right after lunch. 750 million. 14.2 billion for research and development. So the question remains, how are we supposed to compete with that? And can we? This is Rage Guy. For those of you that aren't familiar with internet memes, there are more. So prepare yourselves. So when we're talking about innovation, or when I'm talking about innovation, I talk about data, sometimes. Okay, most of the time. And people generally tend to think, oh gosh, it's the guy talking about data, and it's going to be all technology, and I don't want to talk about it. It's not about technology. This is about understanding your members, their wants and needs, predicting what they're going to want, and then giving it to them. Now, interestingly enough, in my estimation, the most challenging part of this is not the technology. It's something that all the previous speakers before me have hinted at, and that's governance. I will read this to you. It is from a Gartner slide, and I steal it willingly. The biggest threat to innovation is internal politics and an organizational culture which doesn't accept failure and or doesn't accept ideas from outside and or cannot change. Now, I know as association professionals, none of you resonate with this particular statement, and it doesn't make any sense because associations love to change. We love to get on the bandwagon. We love to do things quickly. I was an association executive for 15 years, so I can say those things. Associations are complacent. We spend other people's money. We don't have shareholders to answer to. We have a board of directors that are generally made up of people from our profession and are not association management folks. So we give them the balance sheet, we tell them we made budget, everything looks good, everyone nods, and we move on. Is that how to innovate? Do you think Amazon's doing that? Or do you think they're pushing a little bit harder? So I think it is our duty as association professionals to push a little bit harder, to make things go a little bit faster. And the question is, how? So I give you this. I like to have a laugh here and there. How do we do this? Where do we start? How do we change these experiences and the way that we interact with our members? And I think for the next 5 years or so at least, the answer is data. So I threw this in there, and if you saw the matrix, you might recognize it. It's Latin, and it means know thyself. I think this is where we start. We need to figure out where we are, and we need to get our houses in order. So the question is, how do we do that? This is a diagram that I'll walk you through quickly of a data maturity spectrum. It's something that I use with clients to help them discuss where on the data maturity spectrum their organization lies. So while I'm running through this, I want you to think about your organization and where you think it would fall. Because honestly, that's probably the first step. Many associations, and I'll tell you a little story about this after I get through it, are in the data maturity area of being constrained. Their data is working against them. Your data is all over the place. It's in 8 or 10 different partner systems. You have an AMS, but you don't trust it. If I come to your organization and I ask your CEO, your CFO, and your vice president of conferences how many attendees you had at your annual conference, I will get 3 different answers. This is a significant problem. If you don't trust your data, you can't use it to drive member experience, you can't use it to drive marketing, and you're shooting at the wrong targets. It's really hard to hit the wrong target when it's moving and you're shooting at the wrong one. So, what you need to do at this point is start bringing your data together, put it into a state that it is trusted, get some governance around it, and you move on to stage 2, which is supportive. You do have data in multiple places, but you understand how they're all interlinked. Data ownership within your organization is, if not understood, at least defined. Many organizations confuse data with systems. If I asked you, I'll ask for a show of hands, and you don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to. If you have a clear understanding in your organization, and if I asked everyone, they would give me the same answer of who owns the data in your AMS. Raise your hand if that is the case. Yeah, I had a suspicion that would be it. And the AMS is tricky. Does membership own the AMS? Does IT own the AMS? Is it some other department? Everybody uses the data, right? Your events data goes in there, your membership data goes, all the data goes in there. Do different people own different pieces of it? Is there a system owner and a data owner or multiple data owners? Every organization is going to have a different answer to those questions. My point is not to give you the answer. My point is to tell you to have that conversation internally. It's not easy. Governance is hard. You step on toes, you hurt people's feelings, but you need it. You have to have these definitions and understanding of what's going on with your data in your organization. You get past supportive, and then you can start to use the data internally for business intelligence. And there's a difference between intelligence and performance, and we'll get to that in a moment. You may notice my title has both, and I insisted on that, because I think they go hand in hand, but I do think they're different. Business intelligence, you have shared data definitions within your organization. If I come to your CEO, your CFO, and your director of conferences and ask how many registrants you had at your annual conference, not only will I get the same number, but I'll know, does that include half-day registrants, single-day registrants? Does it include people that bought an expo pass only to your trade show? Does it include someone that came to a pre-conference but not the actual conference? You have data definitions that you all agree on. You've worked through this. You have governance. And you're starting to evaluate your programs and products by actual measures that you're using year over year. You might be moving into KPIs, key performance indicators. And whether that's just retention of your members, retention of a certain segment of your members, total dollars from your annual conference, you're starting to measure those year over year so that you can start to do trend analysis and you can start to understand whether your organization is trending up or trending down. Business intelligence is not a one-shot thing. This is not something that you just do once. It's something that you do constantly. And I want to make that very clear. Once you have business intelligence at a level where you're consistently using it to help guide decision-making in your organization, then you can move on to business performance. Now you're talking about data driving development of new experiences, products, and services. It's creating revenue. It's creating value for either your attendees or your exhibitors or your members or your volunteers. You're giving them more because you know more. Business performance is also not a one-shot deal. This is not a project that you do once and you mark done and you never think about again. This is something that you have to imbue into your organizational culture. It is a way of thinking. It is a way of approaching problems. It's a way of looking at strategy. If you think about when your organization asks itself questions, I would ask you to also think about when you're trying to answer those questions or solve those problems, do you always go and get data to support what you're doing? Or are you just running an 11-member focus group and whatever they tell you is gospel? Because there's a big difference. Not to say that focus groups are not useful, they are. They're useful in conjunction with a number of other things that all need to go together. Questions on this? So, where to start? What do we do first? I generally recommend something easy target, we would call low-hanging fruit, which I hate that phrase, but I'll use it here, is your conference, if you have one. Conferences have lots of clear data. It's relatively straightforward to build out a data dictionary. You know who the players are. A lot of times you're using a third-party registration system, so it's not necessarily buried in the AMS somewhere. You can run an exercise to look at what you have, where you are, and where you want to go. And it's easy to set up measures and to evaluate whether or not changes you make are successful. We ran a different marketing campaign. We were hoping to increase conversion to this level. We were hoping to increase attendance to this level. We were hoping to increase exhibitor satisfaction by 2 points. Were we able to accomplish that? Yes, no. If yes, keep doing it and add. If no, change it and do something else and measure again, right? So it's relatively straightforward, and it's relatively easy for people to get their arms around. This is classic psychological foot in the door technique, right? It's like a pilot program. We're going to run a pilot. Beta test. Ron?
Yeah, the other thing little green thing. I think the other thing that's important about starting at I totally agree. So the other thing that's important about starting a conference is there's usually lots of revenue to hide expense in, and that makes people go, yeah, we could try that because you're already making money, and so you're not trying to take money away from operational.
A very good point. There is a cost that is associated with this effort. It's very much like when they were talking about PMO. PMO is not free. PMO takes time, resources, people, knowledge, training, and then you have to actually make people do it, which is probably the hardest part. This is similar. It's a change. It's about change management within your organization. So when I said before, this isn't a technology problem, this is a governance problem. This is what I'm talking about. Yeah, there's lots of technology solutions that are out there that can help you use data more effectively, but it's really about getting your organization to understand the benefits. It's all about what's in it for me, right? Whether your executive director is going to get that one report they want every week about the conference so that they can track according to comparing to the last 2 years, whether or not you're more or less successful, that's what the executive director wants. What does the director of marketing want? Something entirely different. What does your director of membership want? Something, you have to be able to give them these things. Then they will come on board with you and be your champions. And then your initiative will be successful. So once we got the conference squared away, we've got our data definitions, we're doing things to improve the conference, and people see that this has measurable impact, then we move on. Then I recommend we go to marketing and membership. To be very clear, this is not written in stone. This is just a general, relatively generic way of looking at data progression through your organization. I put this up so that you can think about your organization. You might want to start with marketing. I have no idea. Some places have a really strong CMO that's very numbers driven and wants those SEO numbers and wants to understand conversion. Great, we can start there too. As long as you start somewhere. That's the important part. So when you move to marketing and membership, you're using this data in different ways. You're starting to segment your list differently. You're starting to target specific populations, whether you want to bring in new people to membership. So if you're, court reporters and you suddenly are changing your name to include all folks that do captioning, you might want to run a campaign around that. You might want to run multiple campaigns and split campaigns so that you know how to reach the captioners and how to reach consultants that want to exhibit for the captioners as opposed to just stenographers. This is where data comes into play. Marketing and membership. You want to grow your membership. Who are you marketing to? How effective is it? What are they opening? What don't they open? What kind of webinars do they go to? Where are our non-members who are coming and engaging with us, and how can we get them in to become members? All data-driven. When you've had some success in marketing and membership, then I usually recommend you've got your organizational data in relatively good shape. And bullet 3 is something that I believe is relatively new to our space, and that's industry data. Now, some trade organizations already do this. They have a data department, they're gathering industry data, and they're putting out some kind of reports, guidance, or vision for their entire industry. I was the CIO at the American Wind Energy Association. We had a department that did nothing but call suppliers and turbine manufacturers and power purchase agreement folks and understand everything that was going on in our industry. They put out a once-a-year report. We had a big press conference in New York, and everybody said, well, this is the vision of the wind industry for the next 2 or 3 years. That's kind of hard to do. Most organizations don't have that capability, but what if you could? What if there was an organization that could go out and do the analysis for you and come back and say, these are the kind of things you should be looking at. This is what your members should be interested in. Whether you're talking about your conference specifically and driving the content arc, because let's be honest, at our conferences right now, we put out the call for proposals generally 6 to 9 months before the conference takes place, right? Which means every session that's happening from the CFP at your conference is at least 6 to 9 months old. Maybe more. Maybe they've done it before. Maybe they dreamed it up 2 years ago and they just put it in again. And you guys thought it was a good idea. That happens. How do we get more current thinking? How do we look ahead of our membership? This is where predictive analytics comes into play. It's not just taking what your members are doing now and trying to guess. It's not just pulling together a focus group. And we'll go a little bit more into this. But associations need to be thought leaders for their industries. And we have the capability to do it. And we have the neutral positioning where people will listen to us because we're not advocating for ourselves. We're advocating for the industry. And that's a big difference. So, let me walk you through a quick case study. This is something that I was working on while I was at EDUCAUSE, outside of Boulder, Colorado. I was the chief operating officer there for 4 years. And we started pulling some data together, not only our registration data and our marketing data, but also what we call passive behavioral collection. So we put little devices on people so we knew where they went and how long they spent there while they were at our conference. That gives you an idea of where they are, what they're interested in, what they're not interested in, where people tend to aggregate, things like that. And I'll show you some of the things that we started to do. This is a case study. This is something that you can think about in your organization and say, would something like this be helpful to us if we morphed it or did something slightly different? We could tweak it because what we really want to know is X, or our objective is this. Could we use data to get there? So this gives you just a very, very thin, deep slice. What we wanted to know at EDUCAUSE was whether or not our different segments were happy when they came to our annual conference. So, we service CIOs, we service teaching and learning professionals, we service deans, we service line staff. It's a big group. And I would imagine most of your organizations and your conferences are the same. You have lots of different segments. And when you do your evaluation for the conference itself, you probably just ask them, Did you feel the conference was successful? And you send out 10,000 and you get back 800 and your conference was 94% happy. Okay, that's pretty good, right? Because that's the best we can do. Wrong, not the best we can do. There's quite a bit more, so let's dig deeper. We asked a question during registration. What is your primary reason for attending the conference? I wanted to know why people were coming. Now this tells us something that a lot of organizations don't know. Give me a quick show of hands if you know definitively, not guessing, but know, and can show me numbers as to why people come to your conference. I've got 4. Okay, now be brave and raise your hand if you don't know, and that's okay, we're all gonna do it together. Okay, people are going like this. Okay, yeah, that's true. Would you like to know that? Would you like to know why people come to your conference? Probably. You might think that most people are coming for one reason when they're actually coming for another, which is exactly what we found. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. So we took that, and we found out that people were coming for a specific set of reasons. And then we tracked their behavior. What sessions did they go to? What booths did they go to? Et cetera, et cetera. So now I know why people are coming, and I know what those people are doing while they're there. And I'm able to segment that data. So I can tell you people that came specifically for career advancement tended to do this. I'll get to you in a second. People that came for the keynote speakers tended to do this. The last piece where we tied it all together was when we did our evaluations. Now, evaluations are generally anonymous, and that makes it really hard to track to an individual. People won't fill them out if they're not. But what we did was we asked when we did the evaluation what their primary reason for attending was. So now I know why they came, I know what they did, and I know by segment whether or not we provided that segment with a successful experience. We're going to go into that in a second. In the blue.
So when you asked people when they registered, why they attended the conference, and when you tracked what they did after, like during the conference, did it match? Like, is what they said they were coming for really what they did?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you. I didn't pay her, I swear. So when we started our analysis, we started here. And these are the different segments. So you can see, now we know why people came. Now, it was surprising to us. To be fair, I made these numbers up. I left before I had the actual numbers to go work for Experient. So these numbers are made up, but that's okay. Because whatever the numbers are, you learn stuff. So in this case, let's pretend that we found out 32% of our attendees were there to network with colleagues. Now, I know we all spend lots of time on our content program. We have a committee, we have a program committee, we have a call for proposals, we have peer review of the proposals, we bring them in, we do this whole thing. What do we do for our social program? Do we spend as much time on that? Let the president's wife do it, yes. Do you even have a social program? 32% of your attendees are coming to network and you're giving them content. Don't you want to know this? Don't we want to go to our exhibitors and say, hey, we need to sponsor a couple happy hours. Our folks are coming for networking. You can provide it. You're going to sponsor. Everybody wins. These are the numbers that we have to back this up. These are the kinds of people that are coming for networking. They're top-level executives. They indicate that they have buying decision-making power, and they're looking for a system in your area in the next 3 to 6 months. Don't you want them at your reception? Different kinds of conversations. So we take why they're there, and then we take what they did. So we break it into content, expo, and social. And we're able to say, hang on one second, how long they spent in each of those kinds of activities, okay? So content, in this case, is anything having to do with a content session, whether it's a pre-conference or just some kind of topical session. Expo is time on the expo floor, and we can break that into what booths they visited and how long they spent there. And then social, networking, happy hours, time in the halls, time they just spend with each other. And now we're going to go and answer your question. At the end, we can also measure how successful it was. So you can see just this table alone is probably a year's worth of work on the other side. Because once you know this stuff, now you got to start making changes. And the question is, how do you do that? So we look at the content folks. 13% of people came for content. They spent more time than anybody else in content session. And their net promoter score, raise your hand if you need me to explain net promoter score real quick. It's okay if you do? Okay, so Net Promoter Score is essentially a measure of how happy they are. And the baseline is 0. So if you're okay, it's a 0. If you're really happy, it goes up. If you're really unhappy, it goes down. So 0 is okay, above 0 is good, below 0 is bad, essentially. This metric can be whatever you want it to be. It could be a general evaluation score, overall satisfaction score, whether they like green jelly beans, doesn't matter. It can even be multiple things. In this case, I'm using Net Promoter Score just as a general guideline. So you can see the content folks, there weren't as many as we expected. They went to content like we thought they would, and they're super happy. They love this program. So for that particular segment, we're very successful. Do we need to make major changes here? Probably not. If we do the same thing next year, we can predict with relative accuracy that we're going to have success. That will continue. But we will watch this. Next year, the Net Promoter Score might be a 14, and then a 9. And then, okay, now we got to do something. We get to see the trend of whether or not we're successful with this specific population. Now let's take another look at networking with colleagues. Much more of those than we thought. So that's something we need to look at. Are we spending enough time on our social programs? So many of our attendees are coming for that. How much time did they spend in social activities? Not that much. So are we not marketing it properly? Do they not know these things exist? Are there not enough opportunities to go to social kind of things? And what's their Net Promoter Score? Minus 18. This is bad. When we're talking about retention of attendees or retention of members, a minus 18, we're doing something that is well short of the mark. This is where we need to focus our energies. Yes?
How are you tracking how much time they're spending in each activity?
So we ran something called beacon technology. There's a little tiny thing on the back of each badge, and it tracks everywhere they go. So I can tell you what sessions you went to, what booths you went to, how long you stood there, how long you were in the sessions, etc. So yes, this is in some ways based on that. That being said, you can do plenty of business intelligence without this. I'm just giving a deeper example of what's possible, because a lot of people aren't aware that this is possible. Question or scratching heads? I see hands kind of waving around. Okay, scratching heads. So obviously there's a lot that comes out of this. And what I like to look at when we talk about it is to go back to governance and to say, you know, this data is great, but if we don't do something specific with it, it's going to be challenging. And I'll tell you right now, this data will sometimes upset people. I used to have a slide in this deck, and it was a picture of a very cute puppy dog that looked incredibly sad. And I lost it. But the point being, I would show that slide when we talked about what to do when your data tells you bad news. So for this, I mean, I don't think that this is necessarily bad news. I think this is a learning opportunity and an opportunity to improve the conference and to improve retention in that particular segment. However, other people might see it differently. And you know how associations react when they get bad news. They don't want it. They don't want it. They don't want it. No, the data must be wrong. This can't be possible. Our people are very happy. They've told me such when we met at the reception. So sometimes this will be challenging, and we need to be prepared for that. And that's, again, that governance piece. We need to have mitigation plans. We need our executives to understand that this is a learning opportunity, that we can take this and do something more and better with it. You look like you're going to put your hand up. Yeah.
I was going to ask a question. Don't you need to also segment your attendees like by type of attendee? Because exhibit hall can be one thing to an exhibitor and another thing to an attendee. So wouldn't you want to segment that even further?
You can.
Okay.
You absolutely can. So the question was, wouldn't you want to segment this by attendee type as opposed to why they're there? The great part about data is that once you have it, as long as you're comprehensive in gathering it, you can segment it pretty much any way you want. So not only can I segment this data by whether they're a CEO or a teaching and learning professional, I can also segment the data by whether they opened a specific marketing campaign, if I'm blending my data together. I can even break the career advancement group into topical types. So I can say CIOs, who were most interested in career advancement. I can say teaching and learning professionals, who were most interested in going to the exhibit hall. And you can start to break it down into smaller and smaller groups. Now, the point of all this, going back to Amazon and Netflix, is to understand what your people want before they tell you that they want it. Right? Henry Ford, famous quote, "If I listen to my customers, I would have built a faster horse." We do a little bit of that. Listening to our customers is still a good idea, but it can't be everything. Right? All right, I'll put this up. So let's talk a little bit about the next frontier and looking at this industry piece and what it could mean. Because right now, if we're trying to predict what content we should have at our conference the following year, we're trying to write our strategic plan and look, well, some organizations do like 5 years out, which I think is too far, but even if it's like a 2 or 3 year strategic plan, trying to predict what's going to be happening, what's going to be of interest in your particular segment, and what your folks are going to want is hard. And so we tend to be super conservative. Associations are relatively conservative to begin with. We don't want to do anything that's going to hurt us. Everything's okay. Our retention's okay. We're hitting budget. We're just going to status quo. We're going to, don't change horses in midstream. So we partner with a company that is doing some really exciting things. And to be very clear, I'm not trying to sell this to anyone. Again, I'm just trying to raise awareness that this is possible. There are other companies that do this. But I want you to know that it's there. They take everything from social media, the unfiltered Twitter stream, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, everything that's happening, published journals, trade publications, everything else. And they take these mountains of data and then they start to filter it. They start to look for trends and they start to figure out what is going to be of interest specifically to your organization. So I show this just as a sample. You can see there's lots and lots and lots of dots, right? Some of them are green, some of them are red, and there's 2 axes. Going up, it's how emotional people are about a particular topic. Each one of these dots represents a topic in a particular area. Going to the right, it's how many posts there are. And you can see that circle there, or oval, technically, represents things that are both voluminous, meaning lots of people talking about them, and emotional, meaning people care deeply. That's what we want to focus on because that's what's coming. So we're able to take that, analyze it in particular industries and segments, and start to figure out curves for when things are going to hit. Hopefully you're all at least passingly familiar with Gartner's hype cycle, where they identify what's hot now, what was hot and isn't hot anymore, what's going to be hot in 2 years, and then trends they see coming like 5 years out. This is something similar. I'm sorry that the quality of this is so low. I pulled it from somewhere else. So this is artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud computing, cloud platform as a service, Internet of Things, and machine learning. You can see all the little dots and the curves. They indicate how many people are interested, where they're interested, how strong their interest is, whether the sentiment is positive or negative. And then the curve indicates adoption and when things become totally normal. So let me give you, this is a lot of very technical speak. Let me give you an actual example. The company that we partner with, they worked with Purina. Purina came to them and said, we need to know the next thing in pet food. So go do some work for us. So they go off and they do all this, right? And they analyze sentiment and what people are talking about and who the influencers are that are talking about those things and where their networks are and what the reach is and how it's all impacting and what's really, really most important. And they come back to Purina and they say, probiotics in pet food. People will want probiotics in their pet food. They're going to start picking it up about 12 months from now. And in 36 months, it'll be fully adopted and everyone will expect it to be there. Now imagine if your organization had that kind of intel. Imagine, even if it was just around your conference, if they came to you and said, the topics that are going to be of the most interest to your membership in the next 12 months are this, puppies and rainbows. The most influential speaker on puppies who has the largest reach and the most positive sentiment are these 3 people. Go get one of them now. Bring them to your conference. They're your day one keynote. They're going to talk about puppies and everyone's going to have their minds blown because that's where your industry is going. The other topic you might want to be worried about is rainbows. So get these 3 featured speakers. These are the people you want to talk about. They're going to lead a facilitation group online. They're going to do these activities with your membership, and they're going to start dragging people in now. They're also going to bring in people that you're not even aware of yet. So we go from taking content we're getting from the CFP and things that the program committee recommends and sourcing some speakers on our own. And as we know, the cliquishness and getting new blood into that group is really hard, right? We just go back to the well over and over because they're good speakers and everyone knows them, and it's the way to go. This is what's next. This is actually using data to predict what's coming. Let me give you another example. This company works with a mattress company. The mattress company comes to them and says, we want to rebrand. We want to do things differently. And we need to know whether our value proposition should be based around comfort or around price. So go figure it out. So this company goes, they do all their analysis, they put all the data into the machine, and they come back and they say, it's neither. Your consumers are not price sensitive. They don't really care about the price of your mattress. Whether it's $500 or $1,000 is not that important to them. If it's the right mattress, they're going to be willing to buy. In addition, it's not about comfort. What we're seeing coming down the pipe is that it's about performance. When you sleep better, you perform better at work, you perform better for your family, you perform better in athletic activities. So it's about performance. That's your branding. The mattress company said, okay. They rebranded. Marketing campaigns were about performance. Their sales went from 500 million to, I think it was 860 million. Wildly successful campaign. All because they were looking ahead, and rather than taking the stuff they thought they knew, I mean, you get everybody in the boardroom, you do your strategic plan, you know what you're doing, and really, how many times is strategic planning just a way of reframing all the projects you're already doing and then ramming them into whatever priorities you came up with? Everyone's nodding. Yeah.
Is it still the same crappy mattress? Or did they change mattress?
I don't know. Fair question. So one more sample. So work they did with Nestle. Nestle came and said, we need to figure out what's going on with this whole non-meat protein thing, right? Because this is a big deal. So they looked at soy, they looked at edamame, they looked at quinoa, they looked at insect-based proteins. And in this case, you can see from all the noise on the left, that's all the activity that's going on. And they're able to measure sentiment and predict what's coming. And then you can see the curve as to this is when things are going to, this is when you want to get into the market, essentially. Because you don't want to get in too early. And you don't want to get in too late. So you got to get in at the right time, and you got to price it in the right way. So you can see they have all these metrics for where these things fall on the curves, when is the right time to get in, etc. It's a very different way of thinking and approaching these problems. It's something that we haven't really done as an industry, an association industry before. Because I don't think it's really been available. But I want you all to know that it is now. And that there are obviously large Fortune 500 companies. This is the way they're operating. These are the kind of exercises they're participating in to understand their market. When I talk to association executives about market forecasting and trend analysis, we haven't really done this. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, I've been an IT executive in the association space for probably 15 years. I've never seen anything like this, which is why I get so excited about it. Because I would love to be able to go to an organization and sit down with them and say, okay, let's talk about your population, let's talk about your people, and then let's find out what those populations and people are actually doing and saying and what they're interested in. Yeah.
So why is it that we're not hearing associations doing this kind of work? Is it because the financial investment that it requires is so overwhelming that most associations can't afford it? Or is it because they're not even thinking about it?
Yes. No, the investment is not insignificant. I won't lie. I mean, it's, you're not going to put $2,500 on the table and get this kind of research. There is a financial investment. That being said, I think there's two reasons. One is I don't think this has necessarily been possible until recently. Now, generally, as you all know, we're usually 2, 3, maybe 4 years behind private sector, behind the Fortune 50. Because we don't adopt things as fast, and also because they have way more capital and they're way more open to taking risks, whereas we're not. So I don't think the predictive analytics capability, and honestly, the neural networks and the natural language processing that's required to do this, when somebody tweets something, their machine has to go through and figure out not only what they're talking about, how important it is, whether there's positive or negative about it, how positive or negative they are, and what kind of influence they have, and then mash that up with hundreds of thousands of other similar things on the same topic, and then put some data in front of us that we can use to drive conclusions. It just hasn't been there. The AI hasn't been quite developed enough yet, but it's there now, and it's going to get better. So I was actually talking with Dean at lunch, again, because Dean's a super smart guy, and we were talking about some of the challenges that we face as an industry. And the funny part is I mentioned, I was talking to somebody else last week, and they were amazed that the kids in Florida, the shooting victims, that those kids and all the other kids around them have been able to essentially self-organize this gigantic movement. They're able to organize marches, rallies, sit-ins, political activity. Who's organizing all that for them? Nobody. They are the digital generation. They were raised on this. If they can do all that by themselves, I hate to ask the question, but it has to be asked. What do they need us for? Because that's a lot of what we do. So this next generation, not only are they digital native, but they're initiative people. They go out there and get stuff done. They don't turn to someone else for help. They have all the tools and they're totally comfortable using them. They've been networking since they were 5. So there's a challenge there. We have to continue to provide value. I think this is one of the ways we do it. And just imagine being able to have your executive director, or if you are the executive director, just imagine being able to stand up on stage during the first general session of your annual conference and say, we have a report. This is our vision for the industry for the next 3 years. These are the kinds of things we believe our companies or members should be focusing on. This is what we see coming, and this is how we're going to help you. This is the value we're going to provide around these things. These are the new service offerings or products that we're going to develop or have already developed to help you deal with whatever's coming. It's a lot different than the checklist of, here are the 5 things that we accomplished this year, right? And I think, at least I know, I would rather be talking about this than, we also revamped our operations department, and now, our checks are processed 28 minutes faster. It's just different worlds. I think I've got 3 minutes. I can take 1, maybe 2 questions. Or I can just stop if y'all are tired of listening to me. Yeah.
If you haven't got the budget to do this, as a lot of the associations here probably haven't, what are the kind of questions that you should be asking people without going through this kind of a process?
That's a great question. I would go back to that earlier slide where I recommend you start biting off a small chunk, whether it's you start in marketing or you start in conferences. Starting to ask those questions is exactly the right way to go. And it's usually big questions that everyone assumes you have the answers to, but that you actually don't. So whether it's why people are attending a conference, or are people more likely to attend if they're 200 miles away or less, or is there something big that we should be doing that we're not doing, and is there a way we can measure that? The way I generally go in it is find assumptions and challenge them. Because so many association governance decisions are made not on data, but on the assumption of the 5 people in the room, right? Or we've always done it this way and it's been pretty good, so we're just going to continue doing it. That's how businesses fail. The one thing that you need to know about Amazon, the reason they've been so successful is that they disrupt themselves. They don't wait for someone else to do it. Remember when Amazon was a bookstore? Yeah, that's where they started. A little website that sold books. Then they sold digital books. Then they needed to disrupt again, so they did 2-day shipping. Then it turned into a membership club. Then they did Amazon Web Services. Now they're the biggest cloud provider in the world. And where are they going now? Streaming video? Music service? Healthcare? They're hitting the notes before anybody else even gets there. It's because of stuff like this. They know what's coming. Yep.
I'm wondering about the data in the difference between professional societies and trade groups. In professional societies, right, you're interviewing the people and you're gathering data from people who will likely continue to be active in the organization. But in trade groups, that, you know, those employees change, right? And some people are here today, here. So does it matter? Are they both statistically valid? Can you apply the same data purity on a trade group as you can with professional societies?
You can still drive outcomes. The approaches are very different, though, because you're absolutely right. Professional societies are individuals, and they're bought in on their own level, whereas trade organizations are companies. So as long as you're working with the same person at the company, you're okay, but they change like crazy. I mean, I've worked for trade orgs, and I know what you're talking about. So especially here, when you're talking about the trade orgs, I think the industry focus is stronger, and I think the businesses are probably more interested in where their industry is going, as opposed to if you're talking to orthopedic surgeons, it's not going to be as important to them. It's still important in that you can drive content at your conference and you can drive the vision of the organization, but on the trade org, the businesses, not only are they used to doing this because, you know, a lot of them are bigger companies, they also have that set of expectations and they understand the ROI of where this goes. And so I think it's probably a little bit easier to push forward. All right, looks like I'm out of time. Thank you very much. You've been a lovely audience. It's been a pleasure.